Okay, so today we are going to be discussing Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows. Now, if you're new here, I do 2 videos every single time I get through my reread of the series. I have my gush, spoiler-filled talk about how much I love the book and all the amazing things about it. That one's already been posted. I'll put it in the corner and in the description so you can check it out if you haven't already. And then we do this video where I just kind of take a more critical look at the book and talk about all the things that don't quite fit just right together. I apologize in advance for having a whole day between these videos. I usually post them one after another, but these videos have taken so much to film, and I know the editing is going to be so much as well, that I just need a day between. So I'm gonna start, the first couple of things I'm gonna mention are just gonna be really small things that I thought were kind of funny, but aren't a big deal. The first one I've mentioned before, but it keeps coming up, and that's with Azkaban entirely. Once again, Lucius is broken out of Azkaban, and he rejoins Voldemort. Voldemort's followers repeatedly are broken out of Azkaban and rejoin him, and every time they have their wands again. And I've brought this up a few times because it keeps happening, and there's no mention of how they're getting these wands back. Obviously, their wands are taken away from them when they go into wizarding prison, but the fact that they break free and then are just handed their wands back just seems so odd to me. I mean, when somebody goes into Azkaban, do they just leave the wands on a table somewhere that's easily accessible? Or do they, like, there has to be some sort of system in place that would make it a little bit difficult for them to just get their original wands back over and over and over again. The other little thing that doesn't actually matter, but I just thought was kind of funny, was when we were in the burrow with the kids, and Molly is trying to keep the kids apart from each other because she doesn't want them to go on their grand mission. And the way she does it is by constantly giving them house chores. And it's so funny because it doesn't make any sense that this should be a hindrance to them whatsoever, because all throughout the books, everybody does house chores by magic except for the underage wizards. There's even a scene in an earlier book, I think it was in book 4, when Ron and Harry and Hermione are peeling potatoes the Muggle way, and then Fred and George decide to go out to go do something fun, and Ron says, just help us with these potatoes. You can do it with a flick of your wand and it'll all be done, and then we can go with you. And Fred and George won't do it because they want them to do their Muggle work. So there's no reason that these kids need to do things the Muggle way. There's no reason that they shouldn't be magically doing this stuff, because one, Ron and Hermione are already overage at the beginning of this book. Harry, even at one point, everybody is packing their bags the Muggle way, and Harry wakes up, Ron tells him happy birthday, and then Harry goes, oh yeah, I can do this now. And he flicks his wand and his bags pack themselves. And it's like, okay, why didn't Ron and Hermione do this the entire time? So getting into the Horcruxes, Hermione is able to Accio some Horcrux books at the end of book 6, but we learn about it in book 7. After Dumbledore died, Hermione went back to her dormitory and then Accioed the books to her, and they flew from Dumbledore's office into her hands, and she's been reading about Horcruxes. So she's telling them all about how Horcruxes work, and some of it's really interesting. It's cool to finally get some clarity on how the Horcruxes work and why they're so significant. What doesn't quite work is, while the magic container is still intact, a bit of the soul inside it can flit in and out of someone if they get too close to the object. I don't mean holding it for too long. It's nothing to do with touching it, she added before Ron could speak. I mean close emotionally. Ginny poured her heart into that diary. She made herself incredibly vulnerable. You're in trouble if you get too fond or dependent on the Horcrux. Popping back in because I wanted to point out this scene too. Then later we have the text. She held out her hands, and Harry lifted the golden chain over his head. The moment it parted contact with Harry's skin, he felt free and oddly light. He had not even realized that he was clammy, or that there was a heavy weight pressing on his stomach until both sensations lifted. Better? Hermione asked. Yeah, loads better. So much of this book is focused on them wearing the locket, and the locket being worn affects them. None of them become dependent on this Horcrux. None of them become attached to it. None of them pour their heart and soul into it like Ginny did. She became emotionally attached to the object, and that's why it was able to affect her. But being near the diary itself didn't affect Harry. He didn't have any sort of depressive feelings on him when he was just holding the diary or carrying it around with him in book 2, and yet the locket does affect them in a way that it strictly says it doesn't in this book. Now we need to talk about charms that replenish food or drink. So I talked about this in my last review. It wasn't in my doesn't make sense video for book 6, it was in the review video for book 6. I also put a lot of things in my review videos where I talk about this doesn't really actually work, but the more minor things and not so much like the bigger stuff. So in my last review video for book 6, I talked about how Harry replenishes Slughorn's drink and gets him super drunk so that he'll finally give Harry the memory that Slughorn is refusing to give them that they need for learning more about Voldemort and the Horcruxes. So when Harry is repeatedly doing this replenishing charm, I brought up, how does this work? If you can just replenish anything in front of you, then why would anyone buy any food or drink in this world? Why would Slughorn have been saving this really great alcohol for a special occasion if he can just drink it now and drink it later and drink it later and drink it later, because he can just keep replenishing it? I had multiple comments saying that this is addressed in book 7 when McGonagall talks about the laws of transfiguration, and I think that must have just happened in the movies because it's not in the book. What is in the book is Hermione saying, "Your mother can't produce food out of thin air," said Hermione. "No one can. Food is the first in the 5 principal exceptions to Gamp's law of elemental transfiguration." "Oh, speak English, won't you?" Ron said, prying a fishbone out from between his teeth. "It's impossible to make good food out of nothing. You can summon it if you know where it is. You can transform it. You can increase the quantity if you already have some." And then Ron goes on to say, well, don't bother increasing this. It's disgusting. So we know that she's specifically talking about increasing the food that's in front of you. Okay. First of all, she said good food specifically because Ron was talking about good food. It's not like it's different if it's bad food. So this proves that in book 6, it has nothing to do. A lot of people were saying, oh, if you have a store of it, then you could just pull from the store or something like that. No, that's not the case. She says right here, you can increase the quantity if you already have some. So if you have some in front of you, then you can increase the amount that you have, which is what Harry did with the replenishing charm in the last book. The thing is that so much of this book is dedicated to them not having enough food. They're constantly hunting for food that they can get without having to reveal themselves by going into town and buying it. They're stealing from farmers. They're getting under their invisibility cloak and stealing from stores. Hermione's regularly leaving money behind as she does it, but they're having to take in less than ideal circumstances because they don't have enough. And there are times when they actually do have good food, like when they steal from a store or when they get eggs and bread from a farmer. So we know that replenishing charms exist. And then Hermione even explains that you can't conjure it out of nowhere, but you can increase the amount if you have some in front of you. So why are they struggling? Why don't they just steal some good food right off, or use one of the situations where they steal food from the market and then just use replenishing charms to create more? It doesn't make any sense that they're struggling for food at all. Also, it doesn't make any sense that their economy works at all, because who needs to go to a restaurant or a bar or anything ever, because you can just create more of anything in front of you. So Bill is secret keeper for Shell Cottage. Ron, after he runs away from Harry and Hermione, he goes to Shell Cottage. So we have to assume that Bill at some point gave Ron the location of Shell Cottage so that Ron could go to him if he ever needed to. That's fine. The problem is that when Harry, Ron, and a slew of other people are imprisoned in the Malfoy Manor and Dobby apparates and says, "I'm here to save you," and then he grabs Luna, Dean, and Griphook and Ollivander, and he takes them all to Shell Cottage just because Ron says, "Hey, go to Shell Cottage. Here's the location. Bill's there." And Dobby says, "Cool," and then leaves, and then comes back and takes Harry, Ron, and Hermione and takes them again. But Ron's not the secret keeper. So there's no reason that he should have been able to give Dobby the information so that Dobby could have found it. That's the whole point of the Fidelius charm, which means that house elves have the ability to override the Fidelius charm, and they can break it, and they can go within a place that shouldn't be allowed. And we see throughout this entire series that house elves seem to have stronger magic than wizards. House elves can do basically everything that wizards can't do. The fact that the entire wizarding world totally discounts house elves when the house elves magic seems to be so much stronger than everything wizards can do is just wild to me. I mean, I get that it's just a really deeply ingrained prejudice, but also, how are wizards so stupid? But going off of that, we also need to talk about James and Lily and how incredibly dumb James is, and Lily is, and Dumbledore is, and Lupin is, and literally everybody else in the story. Because if Bill can be his own secret keeper, and if Arthur can be his own secret keeper, if this is a thing that this world, that this charm is capable of having, then why would James not be his own secret keeper? I know that it's stated repeatedly throughout this series that James values friendship above all else, and from that we can deduce that James would have wanted to entrust his location with a friend so that they, I don't know, so that he can prove his love to them. It's so stupid. Like, essentially what you're telling me is that James valued his declaration of friendship over the safety of his wife and child. And Lily was cool with it. She was just like, yeah, it totally makes sense to me that your value for some random declaration of your friendship by entrusting our safety to them instead of to us, it totally makes sense to me that you want to do that, and I'm fine with them being a secret keeper instead of one of us. And then Dumbledore also, who was in on the plans of who would be the secret keeper, and Sirius, who loved James more than anything else in the world, and everybody else involved, Lupin, everybody else involved in who was going to be the secret keeper to keep the Potters safe. Everybody was just cool with the dumbest decision that they possibly could have made. Not only was it stupid to trust Pettigrew over everybody else, but also it was stupid to trust anybody over the people in charge, the people that were James or Lily could have been the secret keeper this whole time. Really? You're telling me this? It doesn't make any sense that they wouldn't do it. There's also a scene in this book where they Imperio a Death Eater. It's when Hermione is impersonating Bellatrix when they're trying to get into Bellatrix's safe at Gringotts. Wow, that was hard to say for some reason. And Hermione's doing a bad job at acting like Bellatrix, and the Death Eater that they meet up with in the bank starts to get a little bit suspicious of fake Bellatrix, and so I think it's Harry does some fast thinking and performs the Imperius curse on the Death Eater. So this is so odd to me because one, Harry's never performed the Imperius curse before, and he's certainly never been taught how to do it. That's not something they teach in Hogwarts, to learn how to perform the Imperius curse, or at least it wasn't in the years that the kids were attending Hogwarts. So Harry, having never been taught how to do the spell, and we already know from previous books that a lot of spells, especially the more complex spells, require more than just saying the words. There's very specific things that you have to do, whether it's a specific wand movement or really wanting it extra bad, like the Crucio and Avada Kedavra curses. Harry's never been trained how to do this, and yet he's able to do it upon first try. And he's able to do it with such ease. At the very beginning of the book, we're in Voldemort's perspective, and he's talking to one of his Death Eaters, and the Death Eater says, after a painstaking process and very much effort and months of work, we were finally able to break through one of the Ministry people's defenses, and we were finally able to put the Imperius curse on them. So if you can guard yourself from the Imperius curse, and you can make it difficult to be controlled by others, which would make sense, because if there's no way to guard yourself from this in this world, then no one could ever be trusted at any point, because anybody could be controlled at any given moment. So if you can protect yourself against an Imperius curse, which is in the text, it can be done, then why would the Death Eaters not protect themselves? And you can't just say that, oh, maybe that Death Eater had his guard down because he was around another Death Eater, because anybody could have their guard down at any point. But this person, this Death Eater, was working for months really, really hard to get this Imperius curse on this single person. So obviously it's a protection that you can put around yourself that you don't have to constantly be aware of. Otherwise it wouldn't have taken so long for this one person to have their guard down for one moment. But it doesn't make any sense that this Death Eater, who is in the midst of the battle, who is the most likely to be caught, doesn't make any sense that he wouldn't have any protection around him, that a 17-year-old who's never tried to perform this spell before and has no knowledge on how to do it or no extreme ability as a wizard in general is able to do this to one of Voldemort's biggest followers. Last, we're going to end on the protection that Lily gave Harry back when he was a baby. So when Harry was a year old or under a year old, I don't remember his age, this guy, this Dark Lord, he came and he tried to kill him. Lily flung herself in front of Harry and in an act of love willingly sacrificed herself for her son, trying to protect him, because both Lily and James went up against Voldemort without their wands. I don't even know. Even though James's wand was on the couch next to him when Voldemort opened the door, James was like, somebody just burst open my door without knocking. I should go check and not have my wand that's sitting right next to me. I'll go without it. Anyway, we're moving forward. So because Lily launched herself in front of Harry and willingly sacrificed herself for her son, this act of love worked as a protection against Voldemort's killing curse. It rebounded and it hit him, and then he was killed, or not. But he should have been killed if he didn't have a bunch of Horcruxes already made. Okay, fine. In and of itself, you might ask, okay, so you're telling me that not a single other person in the wizarding world sacrificed themselves for someone else and then was able to protect them? But whatever, you can write it off and say there was something very specific about Lily that caused her to be able to do this thing. The problem is that in book 7, Harry does the same thing. When Voldemort wants to kill Harry, Harry willingly sacrifices himself and willingly dies, sort of, takes Voldemort's killing curse so that he will spare the others around him, so that Voldemort can be killed. But then when Harry and Voldy have that really long standoff before they finally have their final spells at each other that kills Voldy, when they're standing in the middle of the Great Hall where everybody's just watching them and they're circling each other for 5 minutes and having a really long dialogue before they actually cast their final spells, Harry explains, haven't you noticed that for the past hour, everything you've been trying to do has been ineffective? Every time you try to do the Cruciatus curse on somebody, it doesn't hold, and everything you're trying to do isn't actually working and nobody's dying anymore? The reason is because I willingly sacrificed myself for them, and so the same protection that my mother gave me is I just gave it to all these people, and you can't hurt any of them because of my sacrifice. So Harry just proved that this is just a part of the magic of this world. This is just how this world's magic works. If you willingly sacrifice yourself for someone else, that someone else is wholly protected from the person trying to kill them. So you're telling me that in all of the wizarding world, not a single other soul figured out that this magic is a thing, or even has sacrificed themselves for somebody else, therefore creating a barrier between them and the person trying to harm them? It's odd to me that the only time this is brought up in the book is in relation to Harry, as if no one else in the world has figured this magic out, or even used this magic accidentally like Lily did. There's just so many things in this world that it seems like, how are wizards so dumb that they didn't figure this out? Like the house elf thing. How do you not understand your magic even though it's right in front of you? So there you go. There are some things that don't quite fit just right within Harry Potter Book 7. As always, I'll say it again, this is all just for fun. I absolutely love this series, and I still think that the series holds up even if there are a couple of things that don't fit just right. These videos are just for fun, and I'd love to continue chatting with you about it in the comments. Were there any of these that you already knew about? Were there any that were a surprise to you? What were some that I missed that you've noticed? I post videos every Sunday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday. I'll see you guys again soon.